let's get underway. As always, I just want to highlight some of the support places that we haven't mentioned hugely this week. One is something that was started quite recently, which is a space for prepping data on the Tableau forum. So Chiara at Tableau has really helped us out by just working that through and making sure that we've got a space where we can start working with prep, how that behaves, just a space to kind of openly ask questions that isn't just Twitter. I know not everybody's a massive fan of Twitter. That is more than fair enough. But the Twitter community is active, but also the community forums are a great place to have that and actually hold that data as well. So that's in there. So go and have a look for us there and just give us a follow if you want to go and see some of the conversations that are going on there. And also we're starting to share more of the prep and data content on there too. And just as a recap, prep and data is this weekly challenge where we're giving you that space to go and try using these techniques, discovering what you can do with the tools to then allow you to go and pick that up and use that in the workplace with a little bit more confidence. We do have over 60 odd challenges now. Yesterday's has gone up a market basket analysis, if you've ever heard of that as a technique. So it's not just always basic bits within prep. Sometimes we can actually do quite complex pieces of analysis using Tableau Prep to do that. If you are starting out with prep, this week is probably not a good week to get stuck in. There's a separate post on Tableau Prep and Data around really focusing on just using some of the built-in functionality. So week 26 of 2019 or week 42 of 2019 is a lot nicer place to go for some of those starting out. And also as a recap, just all of the content from these first 4 webinars that I've done this week are all formed from these blog posts. So it's the how-to prep index on prep and data to go and work that through. And as I mentioned a few times this week, we are actually in the process of turning that into a book. So that's Tableau Prep up and running. Won't be released in March, will be October. But there is some of the electronic content up there now. So the first 5 chapters and the long weekend in the UK, looking forward to it. That's going to let me go and work out how to get some more chapters up there. So there is a trial there, and I've got another code for a longer trial that I said I'd send out yesterday. Yesterday was a monster for me. So I will send that out today and tag that on Twitter. So let's go and look into the content today. So thinking like a data prepper, when do we actually not need prep at all? And it really is more about the tool than anything else. So as I've done in previous days, we're going to go and look at kind of the theory behind it for a few slides. I won't live in the slides too long, hopefully. We'll then got that theory, we'll go and see what that looks in practice. Now, today we're going to look at Tableau Desktop as well. And for those of you who don't use desktop very much, it's the place where we're going to go and author that visual analytics content. So go and connect to a data set, go and work with it, and then potentially send it off to the server or go and share images off the back of that or let other people see what you've actually come up with. So we'll do that, show what the limitations and strengths of Tableau Desktop are in terms of a preparation tool, but then also why do we have prep? So as much as this session is about when do we not need prep, spoiler alert, the answer is we absolutely do need prep over the long run. So we can't avoid that, thankfully. Well, there's probably a bit of a wasteful webinar series, and I've lost 3 and a bit hours of your lives. I haven't. It's good. It's hopefully useful stuff. Hopefully you're all feeling a bit more confident with it going forwards. So like I say, this is the last in the series. And prep and data is there. There's the link for you, just if you want to go and carry on the learning from what you've seen today. So just as a quick recap, just for terminology, Tableau Prep, we class it as 2 different tools. We've got the Prep Builder tool, where just like Tableau Desktop, where we're authoring the content for our visual analytics. In Prep Builder, we're authoring those flows. So we're working out everything from the inputs, so where we're extracting data out somewhere, we're going through and transforming that data, and then we're outputting it or loading it back into somewhere else. So that's what we're doing with Prep Builder. Prep Conductor is where we go and use the server part of the tool. So there's an extension called the Data Management add-ons for Tableau Server, where you can go and start scheduling your workflows on there, saving data sources, saving flows up there, so you can actually go and share flows between other people too. Prep was released in April 2018. I kind of always put this caveat in. It's a monthly release schedule for Tableau Prep. Raheem, Meraki, and Zahira and the team do a huge amount And there's way more devs that I should mention who do an absolutely phenomenal job to go and put all of these brilliant bits and pieces together in terms of the functionality. They are working their socks off to keep throwing out great bits of new functionality. So trying to keep up with that can be a little bit of a challenge within prep. Lots of the fundamentals stay the same, but little bits and pieces are changing over time, and there's quite a lot of exciting bits there. If anyone joined me for the Dublin user group yesterday, that was a webcast, you saw me looking at the new interaction for ranking and also level of detail calcs within prep as well. So that's classed as the analytical calculations, and there's a how-to post out there for that. But I'll have a look over the next couple of weeks and see if I can build out another little schedule of these talks just to kind of get into some more of the complexity that prep has. Ultimately, it is looking to be as simple as possible, taking those boring, repeatable tasks, building them once, and then letting people just go off the back of that and not having to just go and battle the whole time to kind of work with their data set. And ultimately, we're looking to kind of use some of Tableau's wonderfulness within prep. We've got the distribution in the profile pane, etc. Lots of visual clues and the join tools, etc. That's actually one of the big reasons to use prep, and really where we're getting into today isn't just the actual functionality that prep offers, but actually the visualizations, the clues, the hints as to what's actually going on is a massive reason to use prep. Otherwise, you're doing it within code, or if we're trying to do it in desktop, it's not always easy to see the outputs of what's going on at each of those logical transformations and steps we're making. So that's another big reason to use prep. But at this point, I'm gonna go and take you into a time machine and whisk you back to the dark ages, or as it was also known, 2012. The Olympics had just happened in London, and the world struggled to get data into Tableau. Unless it was beautifully formatted as wonderful rows and columns, you had to use things that were just kind of ridiculous. We'd go and code in SQL to go and build tables to then go and load things in. But if you had Excel, formatted Excel sheets were the death of Tableau. You'd have to go and delete out those kind of the rows that are spacing and get rid of the headers and everything else to leave what we class as nicely formatted data so we could actually go and use it within Tableau. Well, if that wasn't possible, or if you were using survey data, was always a classic, you actually had up in Excel, you could have this Tableau add-in. I'm sure it's still kicking around there. It was actually developed in the community, I think, rather than actually developed within Tableau themselves, although Tableau eventually picked it up and supported it. But that add-in for Excel was a lifesaver. It allowed us to go and do some pivoting and some of those common data processing tasks that we would do to get data ready for Tableau Desktop. We actually had to go back into the actual data sources themselves. And obviously that's quite repetitive. We'd often have to go and do that multiple times. As soon as that file's changed or the data's re-uploaded, we'd have to go back in and always manually do that. It really does feel like a massive step back, even though it wasn't that many years ago. So what happened was Andrew Beers, Francois Ivan and the team have over time, they've gone away and built lots of the capability in these common tasks that we were having to do to use Tableau, and hoops, if I'm honest, that we had to kind of jump through to go and get the data in a clean shape for Tableau. And they've gone and built those into the tool. And we see that quite a lot within, if I actually just jump out here just quickly, within the data connection window within Tableau. So within Tableau Desktop, when I go and connect to a data source, in this case, I've created a catchy Excel workbook today called Can't Desktop Prep This. So that might be a clue of where this is going. If you've got data sets, as we go and bring our data set into that we want to use into desktop, then we do have a lot more functionality that's built in here. If I go and select multiple columns, we can go and pivot these. We can merge mismatched fields, as we've seen from unions over the last couple of days of what we can do in prep. So some of those elements have kind of been built in over time. The ability to go and join data sets together is absolutely there now. The ability to go and create unions is there. And again, it's kind of similar usage and interaction that we've seen within prep this week does exist within desktop. But ultimately what was happening within desktop was we were getting closer and closer to getting to this point where there was just too much going on within this connection window. And it became difficult to go and take complex joins and unions and builds And where you have multiple step processes, that became a lot harder to do. So rather than the team almost destroying Tableau Desktop and its ease of interaction for most users and loading too much stuff into this space, what the team did was decide to create Tableau Prep. And that's ultimately where that's bubbled out from. And we're all in a much better place for that. So yes, lots has happened within desktop, and we'll go and have a look at where some of that has become a lot easier. But the past was a heck of a lot worse than what you have today, thankfully. What we also have is the kind of overall concept of data prep as well. And this is one we've walked the line on this a little bit this week. That very quickly, as soon as you start allowing multiple people to prepare their own data sets, you might see what we see on the screen on the right. Now, this is from the Information Lab server. It's actually one of our demo sites, and we have 179 different results. For if we go and search for Superstore in that server, 48 different data sources. One's even called Delete Me. Clearly our admins haven't been on that. But we have a lot of kind of different data sources that, if you've used Tableau for a while, it ships with this data set called Superstore. We use it in demos, we use it in technical talks, we use it in training because it's a familiar language that people can then go away and play with. But ultimately, this isn't far from the truth, that you will have common data sets that exist within your organizations that actually you can go and proliferate out and create what lots of people call multiple versions of the truth. It's creating multiple versions. How often do they update? Which one's the right one to use? It can create a lot of complexity. And this is one of those moments where you do need to take a step back and decide actually where not to prep at all. Do you need to go and drive this work strategically back into a technology team to go and build this stuff out properly? Because it does have to be managed carefully. And actually that managed word is quite nice. Because as long as you create the right spaces where people are testing things and putting it into a sandbox environment rather than saying this is the absolute source of the truth, then you're not going to start stumbling over this. If that sandbox gets cleaned out regularly, then people aren't going to stumble over this stuff and start using it and building it into their workbooks, etc. So actually just taking a little bit of time to manage your data sources, think how your server's going to be set up. Where are you going to let people go and experiment and play to, one, develop their skills, but also secondly, develop data sources? Because once that data source is starting to be used, it is unique, it is different, it stands alone from something else. We have the idea that it is useful and we want to go and carry it on going forwards. That's when we look to go and put it into those production environments, into the sites where everybody can see them. It's clear that these are the strategic sources we're going to use going forwards. And that's started to be built into Tableau more and more as certified data sources. So you're seeing that coming and bubbling out from the server. But we just want to be a little bit careful as data preppers that we don't go and kind of undo some of that great work that we're doing by cleaning data sets and then creating confusion rather than just having to use a little bit of messier data and bespoke that to ourselves. And also I'd warn against creating this kind of complete black market, this complete lockdown environment where only such a few people can actually play and work with this, again, for two reasons. One, you will create a whole load of data sources that, instead of just doing what we're doing and seeing in lots of organizations, they're Excel sheets that are just sitting on people's laptops, on people's computers, in their My Documents, in their Finder files. They're not useful. It's just not driving a data-driven culture. You're making it really difficult for people to make data-driven decisions. So you've got to go and make the user experience of data work all the way through. And part of that consideration needs to be about, well, how do I interact with new sources? How do I add my elements into this? How do I add my financial models in if I'm going to go and do that in a separate source? So trying to think that through is super useful. Also, you're not letting people develop the skills. Hopefully I've got across this week that Tableau Prep has really lowered that kind of point of entry for data preparation. And really, it's kind of one thing that I love to see on this is seeing how people can start to learn these skills, change the language in what they're using to make it super useful and powerful for when I'm then able to go and articulate what I really need when I go and build those production data sources. I've already tested it, I've refined it, I know what columns I do need and what I don't need, and also what some of those transitions might actually look and feel like. That's really powerful to us. So yeah, please don't lock it down too much. Just be careful. And also that one version of the truth, that's actually pretty hard to come by. So it's a nice aspiration to have, very difficult to achieve. That's probably a whole series of webinars for another time. So if we're not using prep to prepare data sets, what kind of tasks can we do and where would we do those? Well, for me, it starts with simple joins. I think this is the first common data preparation task that I see people stumble over. You've got multiple data tables. You need to be able to use them in one piece of analysis. So a join is probably one of the first places people will go to look at. It's also one of the harder things to wrap your head around if you don't have a huge amount of experience doing this stuff. So whether it's actually even just doing simple things like a single join condition, here we have order ID joining to order ID within desktop, even making that choice of, well, what do those different Venn diagrams mean? You need to give a little bit of support and training to your users to get them to understand what that is. And I think within desktop, it makes it super easy to do this. But also, that's a blessing and a curse. Just because somebody can do something doesn't mean it's the right thing for them to be doing. So I think having that little bit of support and knowledge base for people to turn to, it's one of the reasons why I write the how-to posts. It's to go and let people go and understand what they're doing in a simplified language so they can go and pick this up and make the better decisions to make sure that they're bringing back the right data. Because let's face it, where you don't have a perfect match in a join condition, the difference between an inner join and a left join can be pretty significant. Now, desktop does allow you to go a lot further too. The additions of these new join clauses, so the fact that you can create calculations that you can use as join clauses opens up a whole kind of new level. And actually, when forming this talk last night, I found a cool little trick. So I'll show you that shortly, which I didn't know was there. I didn't know it was possible within desktop. So we'll go and have a look in a little bit at joins within desktop, what they look like and what you can do. Join calculations allow you to go and push that much further that maybe you don't need to turn to prep. Keeping everything in one workbook just for that one purpose means that we're not having to go and create additional data sources. That can be quite nice. The iconography within desktop is quite clear and you can become familiar with it very quickly. It's just like I say, that concept of joins can sometimes take a little bit of getting used to. Unions also very similar. So this idea of stacking data sets on top of each other. Unions within desktop, as I demoed earlier, is a simple drag and drop, just kind of in the same way that it is within prep. So if you do just have multiple CSV files that are sitting within a folder, or whether it's multiple Excel sheets that are just kind of building up over time, so a new week's data or a new month's data that's the same structure, you can just union those together. And again, just like joins, unions can go that little bit further within desktop. And I think we've shown part way through this week around this idea of wildcard unions. So using asterisks to go and set up wildcard unions to go and find matching patterns. Because if we had a new Excel workbook for every month that came in, if let's say it's called sales April 2020, next month we're going to have sales May 2020, then what I'd want to do is put sales and then an asterisk. So whatever month and year combination comes off the back of that, they will be wildcard union together, whether that's found within a similar workbook or a similar folder for it actually to go and look through. And you can go and take this quite far. You can dig down into subfolders, or you can actually go and look into parent folders, so that next level up of the actual folders where you're originally connecting to that file. So there's a lot of flexibility there to go and search through, find the right data sheets, and load that in. But again, that's only really for that specific workbook. So if it's a one-off piece of work, great way to do, great place to do it is just within Tableau Desktop. If that's going to be something where that's a data source, you want to go and use that much broader and much further, that's when you just want to take that step back and think, is desktop the right place to do that? Pivoting. I remember the conference so well. I think it was about 2015 when pivoting first came into this data connection window. And I still remember standing up and cheering like an absolute lunatic because I'd spent so much time using that Excel add-in in Excel to go and prepare data, get it ready for Tableau. All of a sudden, I had the ability to do a pivot. And the first time I went to use this in the working world, at my desk at Barclays, I go to pivot, fantastic, works a treat. I get this result of pivot field names or maybe measure names, the top of my column headers listed down, get my field values, perfect, worked a treat, apart from actually needing to do 2 pivots, not just one. And that's when I hit an absolute roadblock. So the first time I finally got to use this awesome functionality, you can actually only do 1 pivot, so 1 transition within desktop, and it is only columns to rows, it's not rows to columns as well. So that kind of creates us quite a significant challenge within desktop that, yes, pivot helps us quite a lot. It opens it up to users. Again, it's great for just creating that one data source that you just need to flip once. But if you need to reuse that data source, again, be careful. You can rename your columns within the data connection window within desktop. That's super simple and easy, just as easy as it is within prep. But you don't want to have to do that every single time you get that new data set in, etc. So that's where you just want to be a little bit careful with that and just kind of think, is it a one-off or actually is it a repeated effort? And finally, aggregation. I have to kind of like doff my hat at this point to desktop because it absolutely kicks prep's ass with this. At the end of the day, this is what Tableau does. You go and grab a measure. In this case, I've grabbed sum of sales, dropped it on my row shelf. I then want to go and see how that data is aggregated. Well, Tableau's telling me already. It's telling me my total sales. It knows the question I'm probably going to ask about my sales numbers. First of all, is just tell me the total. And I'm a semi-intelligent being, so as soon as I've found out that total, I then go, I wonder how that's broken down by, or in this case, I've broken it down by category. All I've had to do is grab one of those those blue data fields, drag it onto columns, and then I can see straight away my total sales for categories. That's genius. Like, that is so easy to do, no coding, drag and drop, super simple. If you've used desktop for a long time, you take it for granted until you go and show a new user and the jaws is like, what? Oh, that's so easy. So if I wanted to go and break it down by region, I could, let's go and drag region out as well. Wow. I taught a new group yesterday for the first time, and it's kind of great to hear those reactions again of, that's what's happening. Oh, that's really cool. So desktop, it's so flexible in that regard. We can go and build whatever we want in our desktop worksheets, go and structure them however we want to. That's all updating dynamically based on what discrete fields we're bringing in. And even the discrete fields, yes, they'll go and form the aggregations at that lowest level of detail based on the combinations of dimensions we have in our view. Well, we can even change that nowadays as well, because level of detail calculations can go and say, I know I've got region and state there, I just want to go and work something out at the region level. In which case we then go and ignore state. We can go and fix that aggregation at the level of region so it ignores state. That's just phenomenal. It makes life so simple for us. And that's one thing where I would say we've got to be careful with prep. Are you trying to create such direct answers that you're actually taking away that ability for people to go and work dynamically with their data? I think you've got to go and, again, walk that line between creating a version of a data set that really allows people to get to their answers quickly, but also not traps them that they then can't go and start asking those follow-up questions. So if anyone's been kicking around the data world for a while, they'll know that the 90s was a time of the thing called the data cube. And some of you still may battle with these over time. They still have a little place in the world, but that's becoming less as computing power gets stronger and stronger. So a data cube is almost a set of pre-aggregations to set levels. So as long as the tech team set up all of the aggregations and all the levels you want, they're brilliant. Super fast. You don't have to go and process the data every time. Brilliant. Tableau Desktop doesn't play as well with them because we lose that ability to go and change that sum to an average as we go and try and ask those different questions on the fly. And that's what I think I'm going to want to see people be careful of within prep, that they're not forming all of these fixed aggregations that then lets people lose that control. Having all of the raw granularity of data there is super useful, as long as it doesn't totally kill performance or create a whole load of confusion. So aggregation, I'm going to look to do more of that in desktop where possible, rather than doing it in prep. Obviously, having the aggregate step within prep, changing that level of granularity within my data, going and forming level of detail calculations now in prep, that can actually be super useful. But just really go through that planning process of, what do I think? Well, what do I first of all want my data set to be? And also, secondly, what else might somebody ask from this? Have I left them enough granularity in my data to go and explore that? That becomes super important and super useful to go and work through. So aggregation, that's going to be a tough one for you to balance as you go through this. So after all of that, Tableau Prep, where does it help? Well, hopefully you've heard me use the terms a few times: structured, repeatable, and scheduled. Certainly the first two is absolutely possible with Tableau Prep Builder. If you're doing this work multiple times, you don't want to have to go and set this up in desktop every single time. That's not as structured. That's not following that same set of repeatable steps every single time. If you do, there's a chance you might make mistakes. Whereas if you set a flow up once and every single time you press play, as long as those data sets aren't changing of what's coming in or what's changing coming out the back of it in terms of structure, then you're going to get the same results time and time again. And it's just going to look at the new data if that data set's updating. That is super powerful and super useful to us. Whereas having to go and make that setup, maybe it's not even you who's making that setup within desktop, you're having to hand that control over to your users. That means they've got to be skilled, they've got to have good levels of data literacy, understand what some of that complexity is. So ultimately, if you can build a flow in a structured way, nicely documented, make it repeatable so it's kind of future-proofed, and you can go and schedule that, then really you're taking that work away. You're taking that repeated effort away, which is a huge saving. You're putting more control around that process. And also you're meaning and giving other users that chance to go and really just get stuck into the data rather than having to battle their data prep first of all. And also what prep does let us do is a whole load of things that actually aren't possible within Tableau Desktop. As much as Andrew and Francois and the team have built in some amazing stuff over the years into Tableau Desktop, Prep is that intentional tool that they didn't want to overload desktop. So we've got a lot richer functionality, multiple step pivots, being able to go and flip data one way, then the other, go and change that level of aggregation, go and self-join it back on after we've done a whole load of preparation. Lots of that stuff isn't possible in desktop. So speaking of which, let's dive in. Let's have a look at desktop and have a look at what we can do with these data sets. So with desktop, I'm sure lots of you have been here. First thing is let's go and look at what we actually have in the way of our data. Well, within my Camden sales, I've got categories. So in this case, it's back to soap data for chin and beard certificate. We've got two different categories, bar and liquid. And we've also got the different scents or fragrances listed out as well. And then I had somebody once within a training session go, "You've never seen data like this." Sadly, I had. It come through from a marketing agency. It wasn't profit and sales, but it was data structured in this way. And yes, I did almost cry when I got that as a data set through. So we actually have 4 columns of our profit, so the first 4 months of our year, and also 4 columns of sales. That does make me kind of even breathe deeply now, thinking about the challenge of what you'd have to go through to go and pick that apart. That's what we're going to go and do in prep, but we're going to see how far we can actually get within desktop. Our Lewisham sales are exactly the same structure. It's just about our Lewisham store instead. And then we've also got the number of days it's taken to achieve those sales. So we've got Camden, Dulwich, Lewisham across our 4 different months, and the number of staff days worked in total. So that's an individual full-time equivalent number of days done in our stores. So not hugely uncommon to get data through in this way. It's certainly happened multiple times to me. And again, if you've been there, you've seen that, you kind of know where this might go as to how you might want to prep this. I haven't doodled this out. I wanted to show you what this would look like if we were trying to do this on the fly a little bit more. So I only went through one run through last night. That's where I found some cool little tricks. So we'll show that as we go through. So first of all, my first reaction was, let's just go and grab our Camden sales. And I know because Lewisham's the same data set in the same structure, I'm just going to go and union those two things together. Fantastic. I've got my category, my scents from Camden, so it's from both. And I can use my actual sheet name to go and work out whether it is Camden or Lewisham. We have split built in. And if I do split on that, then I can see that I've got my Camden or Lewisham result coming back. So I could go and rename that field as store. Nice and easy. I wouldn't actually need these tables and sheet names anymore. So I can just go and get rid of those. Again, Tableau Desktop, so a read-only tool, so we're not actually deleting them. That's why the terminology there is hide, and we can always get those back if we need to with that show hidden fields button there. Cool. So that's a decent start, but then we need to kind of get into the pivoting. So if I go and grab my sales, I can go and say, hey, let's go and pivot those. So that creates pivot field names and pivot field values. That's kind of done the job that we'd want it to do. So let's go and change that to be called my sales. And then my pivot field names, I could again go and split this. This time I'll show you a custom split. So I can say, based on my space, I want everything that goes up to that first space. So we'll go and create a new column of data where we find our first space, which should be at the end of the word sales. Click on OK, and yeah, we've brought the fact that this, my measure, is going to be sales. So that works really well. Again, I can go and hide away that pivot field names. We're not in a bad state. Now let's go and do the same to profit. I could add that to the pivot, and that kind of plays out quite nicely. That could actually work, but it becomes a big chunky data set. I've never actually seen that option within Tableau before, so I love it when I find these things live. That could actually go and play out and actually act as that pivot. If we wanted to have that as a separate column, that's going to be harder, because then we've got to kind of unpivot our sales and profit to get them back into individual columns. So that option again was to go and actually add that to a pivot. So now we have our measure of sales and profit, but actually we wanted to kind of unpivot these two pieces. So take these rows and turn them into columns. We don't have the option to do that. So we can get close in those regards, but not completely there. But if I want to also add in my staffed work days, and just to remind you what that looks like, we've got our individual columns across the top and then our months. Then I'd want to go and join that on because it's a completely separate, it's not that same data set. And I've got to work out how to go and join these things together. Well, in my staff worked months, I want to join this based on the month, so my date, and also what branch those people were working in. And that's where I'm kind of a little bit stuck. Like I could try and create a join calculation. Well, actually, I'm just going to pick up my store from this side. Let's try and do that. So I've got my store. Where are we? Have I not renamed that? No, because it goes back to the initial issue. And this is one thing with desktop that I found that the join happens pretty much before anything else. So I have to go and say, even though I've manipulated that data, reshaped it, it doesn't work. So I need to go and work out how to go and pivot these guys and see whether that's possible. No, it's not. You kind of see that I'm starting to kind of grind myself to a halt. One thing that I did find was useful, and if I wanted to go and pick up the name of the sheet, so just if I did, and if I could actually go and pull together my stores, then let me show you a little funky trick that, I'm still going to go back and use prep in a minute, but it was quite fun. But if I actually started with my staff work days, then I could pivot these guys. And then to go and add a new union, it's easier to go and add the union where we're going and dropping in our Camden and Lewisham sales. Click on OK. Then if I want to go and join those together, I could then go and base it on my store. So I could create a join calculation that if I actually show you on this side, sorry, let me just go with that for a sec. Join calculation on this side, you can actually use the sheet name. So that would allow us to go and use the Camden and Lewisham sheet names within that join condition. And I've never seen that kind of done elsewhere before. So that was something useful I found. But ultimately, I'm not going to be able to prep this stuff within desktop. However hard I try, whichever order I do things in, I can make some good progress. I just can't get all the way there. So even something that's pretty simple, there's only really 3 tables we're putting together, desktop, it can't prep this. It's good, it's just not quite there. So let's go and look at what this would be within prep. So I'm going to go and connect to exactly the same Excel sheet. And I'm going to go and show you some of the things that we were looking at earlier of where prep just starts to make this a little bit easier. And that's just going to take a little bit of time to load. So I found that hibernating my laptop at the moment, prep then takes a while to reopen, and that's actually not going to play ball. That's really annoying. And the only way to get out of this is to and restart my machine, which obviously is not going to work with this webinar. But I might try and do that super quickly and see if that works. So let me just try and quit out of Tableau Prep, and if I go back in, see if I can kind of trigger that to reopen itself and work a bit faster. Lots of people talk about sometimes how long prep takes to load. I think this is actually one of the causes of that. Letting prep hibernate on Macs, especially, seems to then just take a while. So let me try this. If not, I'm going to try and sneakily shut down my laptop and reopen it quickly and see if we can make the progress to be able to get through. But hopefully this will load. Oh, it has. All right. Breathe a sigh of relief if we get the profile pane up. Cool. All right, we're good. Hopefully when Tim edits this video before we put it up on YouTube, he can take that little bit out. So we've got our Camden sales, but actually we want Lewisham within there as well. Within the input step, we do have this option to do a wildcard union. Within here, let's just say maybe we're going to get our dullage sales in at another point. We can say all of the sheets within this workbook, as long as it matches a matching pattern of, in this case, asterisk sales, and if I click apply, what we see is that Camden sales and Lewisham sales are going to add themselves into this input tool. And you'll see this single sheet change to a single sheet with a plus sign just down here. So when I click apply, that means that both of those workbooks, those worksheets within this Excel workbook are now actually sitting within this data set. And that makes life a little bit easier for us. So when I go and have a look at the data set now, then I can start to get the idea of what I need to do to start tidying all this stuff up. I'm going to have to go and do that pivot and then do another separate pivot for the profit. But I can start reworking this data. Why don't I, first of all, do what I did within desktop and just go and split out our store name. We're going to hide those table names. And within here, I can just change that calculation. Remember, any fields that you're changing will jump to the left-hand side of your view within your profile pane. Get rid of the file name. That's not going to be that useful for us. And that's kind of our data set that's pretty much ready to go in that first point. Let's now go and do our pivots. So if I add one pivot, first of all, let's go and take our profit first. Now I could go and multi-select these and drag these in, but if I go and get May data coming into this Excel workbook, I kind of want that to be picked up automatically. So not only can you wildcard union, you can also wildcard search within pivot. So if I go and click on that, I can go and say anything that contains the word profit, it will pull those columns in. And as the workbook updates, it will then update and add the profit for our May data in as well. So that's a good step. Let's go and have a look at what that looks like. So that's pulled through our pivot field names. And so therefore we've got our dates and also our values that are now just called profit. So I don't need the word profit there anymore. I know these values are my profits. So let's go and this time use a custom split and take out everything after the space. So between the word profit and our date, because I just want to go and pull this back as our individual dates. So we've got that. I can then go and just get rid of our pivot field names. So that's a nice clean data set. Sales, I'm actually going to go and pick that up and going to go and use a different step to actually go and do that. I found it much easier when working through this last night to actually go and create two flows and then go and put them back together. So I'm just going to name this one, just for clarity, profit. And then I'm going to go and add another pivot step. And this time I'm going to do exactly the same, but with sales. So go and search for my sales, bring those columns in. That pivot's successfully done. So here I can go and change that calculation again. And this time I'm going to go, I could have actually just copied this one up. That would have behaved in a similar way, apart from it still trying to take away my sales. So maybe it's actually quicker just to go and pull back my date, rename that to date, get rid of my pivot field names. And you can see that Tableau Prep's very intelligent, picked up the word sales. And because we're going back to that starting point before we've done any of the pivoting, profit's still in there. So we just need to go and remove those columns. And that leaves us with a pretty clean data set, but we then just need to go and put those things back together. Now, because profit and sales, I want them as separate columns in my data set. I don't want them sitting on top of each other like desktop was almost forcing me to do. And I'm just going to go and join those together. And here is a great use case for knowing what the result of that join is. That's really tough to see within desktop. So here, I just need to make sure that I've got 48 rows in each data set. I want to make sure that I have 48 rows coming out of this. I just want my profit and sales numbers sitting next to each other. So not only are we going to go and apply join clause on where category is equal to category, currently 48 times on both sides would result in over 1,000 rows, because we're not being specific enough to say, well, the date should also equal the date. That takes us down to 288 rows. We should also say the cent needs to be the same as the other cent. And are those sales coming from the same store? Camden's from Camden, Lewisham's from Lewisham. Fantastic. We're down to 48 rows as our output. So that should look like a nice clean data set that we have, apart from we get a lot of duplication. All of those join clauses, because we're saying we're doing inner join, we have to go and see that that's being driven out, where those things are the same, means that we get these little duplicate fields, because store one comes from one side of our data set, store would come from the other. So wherever we have our -1, Tableau has to have different field names after all to go and differentiate these things. Wherever we have a -1, I'm just going to go and get rid of those. Or if you had any matching fields, if they had different names, just go and get rid of those just to make sure that we've got a nice simplified data set that makes sense. Sales, profit, and then our 4 different categories off the back of that. Is that how we're categorizing that data by store, by date, by category, and by cent. All right, what we can do now is go and work out the other data set to go and put that together. So that's our staff work days. Bring that into play. Let's go and have a look at what that looks like. Well, here we've got our month ready to go, and we've got our dates. We've got our dates ready to go. We've got our stores, but we need our stores to all be in one column, so we can actually go and make that join between our data sets. And also, we can then have the values of the staff work days alongside, so we can be clear on what that metric is. So here, that's where I'm going to go and pivot those. Oh, not a join. That's clicking in the wrong place. Go and pivot those. And we could go and, if we had a wildcard search, there's not really a search term that would work here. Maybe if they had the word store after them, that would work really well. But in this case, I'm just going to have to go and drop those in. Let's go and have a look at the results of that. So that's giving me my values. So let's go and call that what that is. That's staff days worked. And then the pivot one names, let's go and change that to store. And then off the back of that, we can then go and knit these two data sets together. So again, we're going to be adding columns, so there's staff work days, onto the end of our data set. Now, straight away, we can see that we've got a mismatch. We've got Dulwich feed in from their staff work days, but we don't have their sales and their profits. We can make a call on whether we should actually leave those in place. But if we don't have any sales and profits, that's not really going to help me. So I'm fine with that being cut out. So those 4 excluded rows, if I want to go and have a look at those, I can see they're from Dulwich. There's the values of days worked, and there's one record for every month. Again, this level of interactivity of saying, well, where are these different bits coming from? How does this all fit together? It becomes super useful to see what do we actually end up with. So it really is worth spending time getting used to this join configuration within Prep, because there's so much richness telling you what's going on within your data. Again, it makes it so much easier to start wrapping your head around what we're creating. Here's one final step that we need to do, which is go and make sure our date is equal to our month. Now you'll see that I've got this as a string at the moment, and I have a month here. Now, when I did this last night, Prep completely played up for me, switching between a US and a UK date. Let's go and see what happens. I'm happy to live life on the edge. So if I go and change this date, and change this to an actual date type, well, I'm not sure whether that's gone American dates or not, but that looks like that's just changed everything to January from where we're at the moment. So if we try to go and join those two data sets together now, based on that, you'll see we get a whole load of mismatches. It's only the 1st of January that stayed the same. Again, Prep makes it super easy to go and actually iterate with this. So let me kill that. I'll now get an error because I've kind of trying to join two data types together that aren't the same. So I'm not too worried about that. What I am worried about is that I need to go and make this date fit the format that is day, day, month, month, year, year. And that's what I need to tell Tableau how to do. Now, we can use a calculation that if you've been preparing data sets for Tableau for years like I have, will be very familiar to you because we had to use this a lot because Tableau used to be a lot less flexible with how it actually absorbed their dates. That's a function called date parse. Let me go and show you how to interpret this. So our date parse, we basically go and say, what's the format of our date? Well, when I look at this date, I know that it's actually, if we go and type it in as a string, day, day, slash, month, month, capital M's, lowercase m's mean minutes, slash, year, year, year. Close that off, comma, and then we say, what's the string that we actually want to use? In this case, it's our date. And I can go and close off that bracket. Tableau is now telling me that's a date field that actually works. So let me just go and change that name to date. I'm just going to go and click save on that. Now, what a date parse does is it actually brings back a full date time. You can see that we've got the little clock icon alongside the calendar icon. So actually to go and unpick that, we can now just change that to a date. But Tableau knows how to interpret that date properly, that when we go back into our join clause, the only rows that we see dropping out of this data set that would be excluded are those dodged ones because we don't have those dodged sales values. And that way we have a nice clean data set that, again, we can just go and take out those duplicate stores where we use that as the join condition. And also our date compared to month, they're different names, but they're the same values because that's why we've got the inner join. And we have a data set that's ready to go. As we've mentioned before, you can just go and drag those columns around to make them easier to go and check what you've got going on within your data set. But ultimately, Tableau doesn't mind too much about that because we're going to go and load it into desktop regardless and have a look in a slightly different way. But therefore, I could output the data and we're clean, ready to go. So yes, I could get through some of those steps within desktop, but at the end of the day, it doesn't take much before we're actually preparing data sets that we've got to jump through a few hoops to get them ready. And that's where we'd actually want to turn to Tableau Prep rather than desktop. Now, going back to that kind of earlier point, we would want to think about the versions of the truth here. You know, does this data set exist anywhere else? Is this going to go in conflict with anything else? I just want to be careful where I publish that and make sure I've got a good understanding of that before I published it to the server and made it available for other people. But maybe this is the situation where actually just showing what the data structure should be. So maybe we can go and start looking at either changing the systems or instigating this as a data flow that we make available to other people because it's useful data that ties all this stuff together. And that's it. That's how to start thinking about, well, when do we need Tableau Prep? Also, when do we not need Tableau Prep? And going into some of the techniques that were picked up throughout the week around how we're shaping that data, how we're planning that data, and why we're trying to do this stuff in the first place. Because at the end of the day, I think the world's become a lot better place in terms of self-service visual analytics. It's really not there yet with self-service data prep. As we become better at that, that's going to become really empowering to let people go and start working with other data sets that they haven't had the chance to work with so far, and go and find out a whole load of new findings that just don't exist anywhere else. So at that point, I'm going to say thank you very much for those of you who've joined me for today and also throughout the week. And I'm happy to stay online and ask and answer some questions. So pop those in the chat. We've got a couple in there at the moment. And then feel free just to kind of head out when you want to, and I'll share the recording of this off the back. All right, so thank you very much, and we will catch up again soon, I'm sure. And I'll try and publicize out if I do come up with another series, if I pick some more chapters from the book to go and walk through those as webinars as well. Cool, but thank you everybody, and we'll go from there.